Good morning, this is Ross Jason Boehm Live. It's the 12th of 15th of 2015. Today I want to bring up the same topic I brought up years ago, slavery in the 21st century of 2015. A little bit of insanity for freedom of speech, thought, and belief. Serfdom. Serfdom is a product of society that was brought up years ago in medieval times. Just like adequate standards of living today. Adequate standards of living today is a human right of international human rights and understanding established with a minimum entitlement of food, clothing, housing, and an adequate level. The right to food, the right to housing, and the right to human right instruments. Social, economic, and right of culture, freedom of speech, economics, social items, and so on. You can find this under Wikipedia and under human rights, equal rights, and the Declaration of Human Rights that's been signed in 1948 by Canada, the United States, Britain, and many other countries, and according to the UN, many countries, I'm just looking at something right now, many countries of the world. And that's the way it works. Right now we're going to listen to a small little spiel about serfdom, how serfs lived. This is also on Medieval Europe, Serfs on YouTube.
The serfs who belonged to the manors never got rich. They were at the bottom of feudal society because they owned no land. Serfs were not even allowed to move away from the manor without the lord's permission, because his wealth depended on the labor they supplied. The lord rewarded his serfs for the service of their labor by giving them a place to live, a share of the crops they raised, and protection during dangerous times. Because serfs owned no land, they had nothing to pass down from one generation to the next, so their families always remained poor. In their manor villages, they were not even allowed to grind their own grain into flour for bread. Instead, they had to pay to have it ground at the lord's mill. In feudal society, even though serfs produced nearly all the food, did most of the hard labor, and were the largest class of people, they had few rights and almost no opportunity for education. As a result, it was nearly impossible for them to rise above the poverty that ruled their lives.
All right. That was serfdom, or serfs, and if you look on the history of slavery in America, full, on YouTube, on https://www.youtube.com/watch ? V equals P big D UK Q 8N P big X big B K triple dot. You'll find black slavery. You'll find how black slavery was, how they had food, clothing, housing, and even took pictures of black slaves. They weren't whipped on this video. They don't show the discipline they went through, and that was usually done on the boats. You'll also find the story of your enslavement on youtube.com. I won't read out the HTTP on that as well. And it'll introduce you to a new way of how people think you're enslaved in society. like I said, and this is the living wage of 2013 of British Columbia. We'll play that now.
In Canada, BC is one of the most beautiful places to live and work. Yet many parents in BC with low-wage jobs end up facing impossible choices. Buy their children clothing or heat the house. Feed the family or pay the rent. Child poverty in BC is very much a low-wage story. The vast majority of BC's poor children live in families with working parents. The solution is both practical and simple. It's called a living wage. What is a living wage? It's the hourly wage needed for a family to afford basic everyday expenses, such as housing, food, clothing, utility bills, and childcare. The hourly living wage rate is based on the living expenses of a family of four, with both parents working full-time for 35 hours a week. The living wage rate doesn't cover things like owning a home, saving for retirement, or saving for children's future education, and is calculated based on what it costs to live in a specific community. So living wage rates change across BC as living expenses change. The living wage for Metro Vancouver for 2013 is $19.62 an hour. Other communities around BC are calculating their own living wage amount. In 2010, New Westminster was the first city in Canada to pass a living wage policy, whereby all staff, including contracted service staff, will be paid a living wage. Other living wage campaigns across the country are following, in Calgary, Kingston, Hamilton, and Waterloo, joining over 140 municipalities in the U.S. In London, the 2012 Summer Olympics are the first living wage Olympics where all 130,000 workers were paid a living wage. All of these places have reached the conclusion that living wages are good for families and good for the local economy. Parents who have extra money in their pockets spend this money locally. In fact, KPMG, one of the world's largest and most profitable accounting firms, is now a living wage employer in London, UK, and has publicly stated the benefits of the living wage. Successful organizations across BC are becoming living wage employers. Is your organization next? For more information, or to calculate what it would cost your organization to adopt a living wage, go to www.livingwageforfamilies.ca.